You can travel to escape, and that's really easy to do. That's just traveling in general. And I think society and the way that our world is set up so that travel is a form of escape. Everyone's always like, oh, where's your next escape? Where are you going on vacation, right? And like, turn your mind off. Like, you have all this messaging already inherent just in the word travel, in the way that the travel industry runs. So that is the default version, is traveling to escape. Traveling not to escape is adding that intentionality behind it.
Welcome to Storypreneurs. Today, our next guest is Geleene Antonio, also known as Geleen on the Go. A former neuroscience and healthcare professional, Geleen left the corporate world to explore the globe as a digital nomad. She founded Travel Not to Escape, offering mental health and community resources for travelers. Geleen also provides podcasts, workshops, and the Digital Nomads Therapist Directory. Join us as she shares her journey and insights on travel, mental health, and self-discovery. Let's dive in. Hi, Geleen. Thank you so much for being on our podcast here. So great to have you.
Hey, Seth. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you. This is such an honor to be on. I'm excited for our conversation.
Ever since I met you at the Digital Nomad Summit in Chiang Mai, I realized we got so many things in common, be it digital nomad, mental health. And I just thought I have to have you on our podcast and just share your journey, share your story. I just think you're absolutely inspirational. So welcome.
You are here. I love it. I love it. This is going to be an amazing chat, and I'm excited to have you on my podcast as well. So we can continue our conversation on all these topics too.
Absolutely. So let's get started. So can you share me your personal journey? What's that been like? What led you to become a mental health coach, especially for solo travelers and digital nomads?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey starting from, I started as a digital nomad in 2020, right? Well, a lot of us, there was actually a wave of people that started in 2020 when we had this moment in our lives where we were questioning what's worth it, right? We're in a global pandemic and life-altering things are happening around us. And are we in the places in our lives that we want to be in? And for me, I was not. And for a lot of people as well. So I wrote that digital nomad wave of 2020, able to work remotely. And at first, I thought all of my problems were solved, right? I thought, hey, bring the laptop to all the different cities. That will help me heal from heartbreak. That will help me through some of the low moments I was already experiencing in burnout with my career. I was a healthcare consultant at the time of going on 7 years. And I was like, oh, well, if I can travel everywhere, that's the solution, right? And I think it took me a month to realize that was not. but it was a great start. It was a great start to freedom and getting to know myself a bit more. I went through a couple of corporate jobs. So I quit the healthcare consulting. I jumped into tech, but then I also quit that career and was really wanting to find something that was more purpose-driven in my life. Like, how can I make an impact beyond spreadsheets and calls to corporate execs? So I started thinking about my own journey. I think there was a coach that I had that had asked me, what was the transformation that I went through to get to that moment that I was in, and what do I want to help people with? And it's always easier to help people through a transition or transformation that you've already lived yourself. So I thought back to it, and I initially thought of the younger version of me that was shy and introverted, and my boyfriend even at the time had told me that I just was not good at making friends and I shouldn't even try. So I thought back to that version of myself. Yeah, exactly. I know that look. And he had the nerve. I was with him for 10 years, God, but he had the nerve to also say, if we were even to get married, would you even have enough friends to fill a table at a wedding? And I think back to those moments. Yeah, I think back to that moments a lot, because the person that I am now And the way that I show up as a friend and the way that I meet friends is very different from the person that he was with at the times. It reminds me of the path and the changes that I've gone through since then. But also that younger version of me that I show so much compassion for, that, had to go through all of the things that she went through. So I want to help. I initially started to help that younger version of me, to build confidence, to take the leap to change her life. And I started working with solo female travelers, or women wanting to use travel as a way to transform their lives. And as I started creating workshops and programs and working with people with solo travel confidence and connection coaching, I decided to open it up to both men and women and really focus on the providing of resources, mental health and community resources for the traveler community, because I realized at the heart of it, we all are needing to take care of our mental health, regardless of what part of your journey that you're in. So that's kind of the start and the fuel that started my journey.
You know what really resonated with me specifically, and why I think you're brilliant in what you do. Travel not to escape. I think that
Mm-hmm.
really hit me. And I know you talked about that a lot. A lot of us, including myself, have been traveling to escape something. And in my case, it was, I would say, probably mostly my emotions, rather than the realities of life. I started off as being very location independent. And then I went to being location independent by opening my own marketing company. But even then, I felt like something was not quite right. And I think traveling for me particularly was a great way to, escape those uncomfortable feelings. What are some common mental health challenges for other solopreneurs or solo travelers or digital nomads that they face?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And I mean, I'm one of the biggest advocates for travel. But I've seen this cycle within myself and multiple people over and over again. And when you yourself go through that, where you're like, wait, this should have helped me. Why am I not happy? Am I in the most gorgeous city in the world? Or I'm in front of a world wonder. Why am I still fundamentally not happy? And you have to ask yourself that question, and you realize that you don't have anyone to ask that question to. It's a very lonely time. It's a low point. So I I want to have that support and community for travelers to also feel heard and have a place to be able to share with people that understand. So some of the most common challenges that I've seen, is that moment that people go through, and then they have to understand why, right? So in a lot of ways, some have been healing from grief that they didn't know that they were going through, whether that be the loss of a loved one, and that could be the loss of a loved one physically, or it could be emotionally. It could be the loss of their identity, whatever they thought they were before, whatever society defined them as before. You're having to recreate your identity as you travel, as you introduce yourself each and every time, each and every city. And so if you defined yourself in a specific way that was tied to your non-travel life, and you didn't realize that you lost that, there could be a bit of a loss in that identity. Um, there's also the adjustment period as well, feeling lost within the cities that you're going to. If you're not connecting deeply with the people that you are meeting or the places that you're in, you feel a bit ungrounded, like you're kind of just floating around and you're like, beautiful wonders, beautiful temples, beautiful beaches, but like, what am I doing, right? It's the same almost cross point that you get to when you're in your career and you're like, yeah, I have the title, I have the money, I have the recognition, but do I have the impact? Do I feel really good with what I'm actually doing day to day, or am I just, creating PowerPoints and spreadsheets? and what is the real impact on a human level for that. Same thing with the traveling. It's like, oh yeah, I can visit and go to any city that I want and it's gorgeous, and I'm, I'm there and living up life, right? Again, it's that like, oh, society views it as like you've succeeded, but you still feel like there's something. So how can you ground yourself? How can you connect? How can you work through some of those underlying things that have always been there, but you just were too busy with other life distractions to really dive in and process it?
For me, particularly, was the case where I was traveling, and I was going to all these great places, but I was solo traveling and I was just
Mm.
floating around, and I never really got a chance to ground myself in anything. And then it just felt for a moment you escape your world, and then you go traveling to all these great places, and after a while, you just feel like I'm great, I'm here, but still there's something missing, you know? And in my case, it wasn't so much about the purpose, because at that point I was working on a marketing agency. I know I needed to make an impact, but it was that lack of community feel. And that is purely because I was solo traveling in my case. Um, and it was very difficult for me to first see myself, ground myself in a place outside my comfort zone. And then now what was actually happening for me is I was just constantly traveling, and like escaping one thing to escape another thing to escape another thing, where you're actually not filling your needs of connecting with people. So you go down essentially this downward spiral of when you're just pushing that feeling, but it's always with you. So wherever you go,
There
it's
you
always
are.
going to be there. There you are. And I think the first time, I really connected was, is through a community program like yourself. I don't remember. I think I was in Vietnam or was in Thailand that I first joined. And I was like, wow, there's, these are these like-minded people like me with the same problems and the same challenges, and we're doing the same thing. And I think this is amazing. And I've been doing solo traveling for nearly 4 years. You can imagine how hard that is. People just
Yeah.
see the Instagram stuff and they think, wow, this is all great. But there's another side, right? There's a cost that you pay for the solo traveling. So what I think you do is absolutely great. Um, I think what are some of the things you would recommend for solo travelers or digital nomad to create that sense of community feel and support who are constantly on the move?
Yeah, yeah. And, it's such an essential thing. And first off, it is a privilege to be able to have this conversation. It's a privilege that we have to be able to travel and to ask ourselves what it is, what impact do we want? Like, what do we value? How do we want to spend our time? And because we are already in this place where we can do these things, why not do it intentionally with purpose so that we can get the most out of the experience? Because I see so many people burning out of this lifestyle. They're like, okay, like I did it. I traveled, like, I went to a different city every few weeks and then I like met a ton of people and now I'm tired and I'm going to go back home. Right. And I want this to be a more sustainable process if this is the lifestyle that you want to live. It can be possible. You don't have to go back to home, wherever that is, or back to the old lifestyle that you had. You are going to be forever changed, regardless of what you do. But you have to, whatever you see on Instagram, that is just someone else's version of their life, right? And you have to really ask yourself, what kind of life do you want to have? Yes, travel is going to be the backbone of that. What else? And I think a lot of people forget to ask themselves more. And you would do that if you were living in a city, but we skip over it when we're traveling. So I think one of the biggest parts is create a structure for yourself that goes with you regardless of what city you're going to live in. Like you become you regardless. That's why that identity piece is really important. Understanding like who you are, who you want to be, who you want to continue to be, and what that person does when they're going to different places. Like for example, I mean, this isn't a constant for me, but like I aspire to be the person that wakes up in the morning and like seizes the day and watches sunrise and goes on long walks and meets people and has a grounded group of friends and, you know, has like the work that's really fulfilling and the activities that really fuel my passion, right? And so if that's the person that I want to be, then that, like, what are the habits that I have to put in place? What routine do I need, regardless of the city that I'm in, that will support me, and that will be my grounding function. Because then immediately, as soon as I land in a city, I already know, if fitness is the top thing, nutrition is the top thing, or connection, like I'm already seeking those avenues as soon as I land. Not like, oh, what else? What do I need again? And like you let the city take hold of you and you ride the wave of like exploring a new city without doing the grounding functions first. So that's just for the travel bit. I think it's also really important to have a support system back home or whatever home feels like to you, and you connect with them because you are going to meet a ton of new people constantly. But who is part of your inner circle? The people that when you are going through those emotional waves, who can you turn to? So I have like a lot of friends around the world. I have 5 that I can call and just FaceTime. And, like they might pick up, they might not. They might be in the shower. They'll, it's just those friends that like you can go to no matter what. You have to have that support system, and also a professional support system. So throughout my travels, I've had both life coaches, business coaches, and therapists, different types of therapists, different types of mentors that I will turn to in order to get me out of certain parts that certain processing things that I go through. So, one tip that I have is for me, every week I choose 2 people, regardless of like who, within my inner circle or friends that pop up in my mind or family members. I make it a goal to choose 2 people to connect with, whether that's like via text or FaceTime. And that's honestly so grounding because if you haven't connected with people that really know you and it's been like months, you start to almost forget about those connections, and you forget about the beautiful thing about connections back home too, or people that you've known longer, is they've known versions of you that people that you just meet may not get to know. Like, for example, the version of me that you've met right now is 2 years sober, but there's like a version of me that like used to party, and like there's my friends back in Chicago that know that like different side of me, right? And just because I'm like in a certain part of my journey right now doesn't mean like I want the prior versions of me to like be forgotten, I don't know if that was the best example, but like I think that there's like some grounding techniques that and things that you can bring into your life, whether that be the routine or the connections from the past, from back home, that really serve as your base. And everyone needs their base. So I think that those are 2 key things for me.
I think for me as well, what I find, especially with all this travel, and then you settle yourself in a place and you make friends. It is true that the people that you meet just now, they just scratch the surface of who you are and get to know you, but it's not enough to, let's use the word, nourish you in the way that your old friends would. And it's true that someone that knows me, had known me for 5-6 years, it's having a different type of conversation is what really grounds you. And I think for me, that works very, very well. Especially, we've met in Chiang Mai, and we met at the summit, and we met so many incredible people. But I always had this feeling that something was missing. Like I was surrounded by all these great people, and I had, speaking to all these people, but it's always like, these introductory level type conversations. And it's always like, who is Seth and what he does and all of that stuff. But rather than, that kind of deep conversations are missing. And those ones were rather back home. And I found that, having like weekly catch-ups with my friends was a great way to sort of ground me. So I can definitely relate.
Yeah, and again, it could be different friends. I schedule like a monthly chat with a different friend or a few different friends because they have kids now, of course, but we make sure to have that. Like if it's on my calendar, it's not happening. So like we make sure it's on our calendars just so life happens, right? And so you want to make sure that the things that are important to you, you're making time for, even though you're on the road.
I, do you know what I find a really good tip? Do you use an iPhone? You can create automations on your iPhone, and then
I
it could
love
message
automations.
people.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, I could show you how to do it after this call, but essentially, I want to keep up with people that that they're not here, and that I always think about, but I just never, for the life of me, connect with them, just send them a message. So I've set up a couple of automations where they just run in the background once a week, and they send them a WhatsApp message, and then that's how they reply back to you, and they're like, oh, X person, hi, and again
Wow.
you start the conversation. So I find that very helpful. It's not because I don't have the time, or it's because I'm just swamped with so many things, and I think about
Uh-huh.
this person, just don't have the, I guess the time to execute a message, which sounds very sad. But at least like this, you just keep it always running, so these people, will always gonna be in your life because you really value them. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and you have to work with yourself, right? Like if you know that you need to have like more consistent reminders, you need to have things like set up in terms of automations or being put on your calendar, or you schedule some time where you're actually in person with these people, or regardless of whether you go back home or you plan to meet in person. It's important to prioritize the connections.
Yeah. Another good tip was the reminders. I just set up a lot of reminders for the days that I need to do. So it just
Ah,
notifies me what I need to do. So that is actually a really good tip as well. Um, so yeah, I'm just trying to be organized as much as I can, but sometimes it's because especially like people don't understand, like you're traveling and your mind is in 1,000 places. You're running a
uh-huh.
company, you've got clients, you've got your team, and it's not like you don't think about these people, but it's just it's just you're just not in a place to engage and start a conversation. And automations and reminders for me has played a really great role. I think I'll tell you what else really works for me, and what I've discovered. So you mentioned a therapist. I use a counselor. For me, a counselor that I've been using for the last 2 years, and we've got like, a weekly catch up I really find like the time to release, my thoughts and my emotions, and it's that kind of safe space. And that counselor really knows you, so
Yeah.
I find that very grounding too, as well. But of course, some people can be like coaches as well, right? Like,
Yeah, it's like it could be a spiritual leader if that's, something that like you have uh I'm not very spiritual, so but like if you had a
yeah,
pastor that you're really close with. My stepdad's a pastor, so he also does a bit of these like working with people. And so like whatever it is that you believe in and that you have as a support system, as long as you have one, I think that's a healthy support system. Let's put that on an asterisk.
yeah.
Healthy support system. People who have your best interest at heart in the forefront. So I think that that's important to qualify as well.
I'm going to ask you a very difficult question, so feel free
Oh,
to be
okay.
broad as possible.
Okay. I love
But
challenges. Yes.
how does one travel not to escape?
Mm. Well, it's the intentionality piece, right? So you can travel to escape, and that's really easy to do. That's just traveling in general. And I think society and the way that our world is set up so that travel is a form of escape. Everyone's always like, "Oh, where's your next escape? Where are you going on vacation?" Right? Like turn your mind off. Like you have all this messaging already inherent just in the word travel and the way that the travel industry runs. So that is the default version is traveling to escape. Traveling not to escape is adding that intentionality behind it, asking, and there's actually, if we want to get down into it, I love it. It's a bit of a hero's journey. So there's like 5 steps, and you want to start off with where are you now? And at each and every one of your trips, you want to have a starting point, guiding post of who is this version that is starting this journey? What are the 3 adjectives that you would use to describe this version of yourself? And where do you want to be? Like, who do you want to be at the end of whatever journey you're going to go to? So whether you're nomading or whether you're going just on like a travel trip, like I think it's really important to ask these questions, right? And if your purpose is, I want to disconnect, I want to rejuvenate, and I just want to turn my mind off and escape, that is also okay. Like you can travel to escape. That is okay. But if you want to travel more intentionally, then where are you starting from? Where do you need to go? How do you get there? What place will best serve the version of yourself that you want to become at the end of this journey? And also, how do you need to act when you're there? It's very intentional. So when you are in that city, do you want to be connected? Like, is your purpose community? Is your purpose to get to know the place that you're in? And if that's the case, then what type of attitude and mentality do you need to come in with in order to actually get that intention out of the place, out of that particular trip? And then when you come back, because this is the piece that people skip over, right? Once the trip ends, they think it's over, but really there's an analysis piece at the end because you are a different person at the end of that journey than when you first started. And you have to ask yourself, like, who are you at the end? And do that analysis and really ask as well, like, what did you take out of that experience? Because without closing the loop there, you feel also a bit lost. And if you aren't a digital nomad and you're heading back home, for example, and you aren't able to really pinpoint exactly like what that feeling is, you feel even more lonely than when you started, because now you've gone through this whole journey. Things are still kind of up in the air. You haven't grounded them into any lessons or learnings about yourself. And now you're talking to people that didn't go on this journey with you, and it almost feels like it never happened. You're like, you've done this whole big transformational backpacking trip or lived your life for the last year, and your people and friends back home, they're kind of like, oh no, things just kind of stayed the same. You want to go grab brunch, right? And skip over completely. There's a process, I think, that you should go through internally. And I look at it not just as a circle, but as a spiral. So you continually spiral up, sometimes maybe down, but every trip you start off and end with a different version of you. So the intentions that are set with each one is very important.
How does one make the leap from becoming a traveler, not to escape, to an intentional traveler and ultimately a digital nomad? Like, and the reason why I'm asking is like, I meet a lot of people, and these people want to be, location independent, remote workers, but there's this like mental block, right? It's like, and they start with all the excuses, oh, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, I've got that. Yeah, it's nice to work from Bali or Thailand or Vietnam or wherever, but can't do it full time. And they want to. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to become a full-time digital nomad?
Yeah, so it all falls under Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like everything falls under that. Whether or not you're a full-time traveler or not, like you have to take care of your physiological needs. Like first and foremost, food, water, shelter, like your basic needs need to be met. And then safety and security. Like, do you have, are you in a safe environment? Is your health needs taken care of? Then you can start to think about, okay, if you have for people wanting to become a digital nomad, you really have to secure a stream of income. Like if you're going from like, I'm so burnt out from a corporate job to like, I want to be a digital nomad, what's the bridge that's going to get you there? Because entrepreneurship, as you and I both know, takes some time. So it takes some really focused investment. And you also want to give yourself the time for ideation where you're not so focused, right? So the first few years, you're likely not going to make the level of income that you were making at a corporate position. So what is your bridge position? Can you take the skills that you have already learned or learn some new skills over the next 6 months to 1 year to where you can at least make a stream of income that is location independent. And it could start off with something like virtual assisting or doing like online digital marketing or, any type of like coding or boot camp type of thing like UX design, for example. I know that there's like some boot camp type of skills that you can learn. So, how can you set yourself up with some tangible skills that you can then use to get a remote stream of income? So from there, you can then start to look into places, like have a target. I think I got this from a book as well. It's like, what is your number? I think Noah Kagan's book. It's like everyone has a number. What is your monthly income number that would free you? So once you hit that number, like for him in the book, it was 3,000. 3,000 was the level that he knew that he could go work remotely in the majority of the countries that he wanted to go to. So take a look at what countries you want to be a digital nomad and can be a digital nomad in based on your passport. And what is that number that you need? Is it 3K? In Asia, in Vietnam, that number is closer to 1K. In Latin America, it's probably closer to 2K. In Europe, probably 3, 4-ish K.
5.
US, yeah, I was like, US, you're going to need like 10, right? Like, depending on what city that you're in. So what is your magic number? And this goes back to asking yourself, like, what kind of life do you want to live? You are creating your life. You're giving yourself location freedom. What kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to be living the life of living in a hostel and doing that for multiple years as you build your business? You want to live the life where you only want to live in 5-star hotels. Also, okay, everything in between, but that means your number needs to change. So again, the first 2 steps that everyone has to go through, and I talk, my mental health and community pieces are higher up on this pyramid, right? But the foundational parts that people skip over or don't quite know how to get to is these 2 foundational pieces of making sure that your physiological needs and your safety and security are taken care of. And then we can talk about connection and then self-esteem and self-actualization and making sure your mental health, of course, throughout this whole process is solid. But if you are talking about how to become a digital nomad, those are the 2 first steps.
Have you had any instances where it's been so hard and you just want to go back home? Like it's...
Yeah, I feel like we've all gone there, right? And that's the reason why I'm so passionate about this topic is like, if this is the life you want to live, it's totally doable, but let's have the conversation so that it's out there in the open and we work through why you want to go back.
Okay,
I
need
think
to hear a story. I need to hear a story,
yeah,
Geleene. Like,
yeah. So, okay. So, oh God, there's so many stories. So let me talk about when I first started nomading. So the reason I started nomading, besides the heartbreak that I was experiencing, ending a relationship during the pandemic, after I started off living with my best friends in New York for a couple months, she was like, okay, do you want to continue nomading or are you going to go back to Chicago? I was like, you know what? I have this really strange idea, but I think I'm going to keep nomading. I want to go live in the most haunted cities in the US. Because I know, you work with me here. So I want to live in the most haunted cities in the US because I have this idea for a book. It's a cookbook with ghost stories and cocktail recipes all fused into one. It's an experience. And so we would, eventually from the cookbook, I would gather these experiences in like the local cities that I was going to. And we would have like a little cooking campfire type of ghost story, being cocktails and cooking a meal local to that particular city. So of course, with this idea, I started off in New Orleans. I had to work in the US at the time, Nomadic. And I started off in New Orleans and I was so excited. I was going to contact all the local chefs, all the local ghost tour operators. We were going to do this thing, right? And it didn't turn out the way that I had planned because this was January of 2021 and it was still like peak COVID at this point. I think the vaccine just got created at that time. And so unfortunately, I got COVID in January of 2021. And because of that, I lost my sense of taste and smell for 5 months. And that kind of ruined the journey of that particular cookbook.
It
And
was a
also the
sign.
reason, yeah, it was a sign of, and it was also the reason I was supposed to be traveling, right? I was going to go to all these haunted places on my own and be a bit of a documentarist and kind of, I was thinking like Anthony Bourdain, but for haunted things.
Yeah.
Right? I still have the domain saved. But I also hit a low point because I was also burning out of my career at the time. So I was burnt out of consulting. I was in this Airbnb that was so cool. This was also when the power grids like completely blacked out in like Texas, and like it was just frigid snow that was happening, and even New Orleans was affected by this like really cold winter. So the place, the Airbnb that I was in was so cold, didn't have heat, and it was Mardi Gras weekend as well. And so all the people were coming to New Orleans from Texas because they had nowhere else to go. And they were so loud. And so while I'm trying to work and like pivoting my life and going through COVID by myself, right? Hadn't met a single person in the city. And um and then there was like just constant partying in the walls next to me. So I was going crazy. And I actually filmed a video of this of like, why did I do this? Like I had a really nice high-rise apartment in Chicago. I had friends. I had a career that was like great. And now I'm here like homeless and like cold and miserable with COVID. And I started thinking like, would it just be easier to go turn back? And like the thing that I realized too was like I really missed my friends at that moment. I was like, I'm all alone in this city. And like here they are partying next door to me, and I feel unsafe and like alone. And yeah, that whole video was, I look back, I watch that video every few months because I'm like, oh my God, who is she? She's so miserable. And I was just like, man, like I really miss people. Like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. So that was definitely like a low point in my life, but I look back to it because the key pieces that I was missing at that time are now the pieces that I have and that I share with people in order to keep them going through similar moments that they go through.
Those pieces? I want to hear those pieces.
Yeah. So I mean, like the key piece was the foundation of connection, right? I felt so alone in the city. I didn't know how to make friends at the time. Now I do, right? Like anytime I land in a new city, I now know what my strategy is. And it is kind of a strategic thing. Like you have to understand who you are and where your people are going to be. Like I went to a meetup last night here in Da Nang. It lasted 5 minutes. And I should have known already because it was a generic meetup. It was just a generic meetup of like nomads in the city. And without anything foundational to really connect you with people, it just, I joined a conversation. They talked about apartments for 10 minutes and my eyes glazed over and I was like, this isn't it. I'm going to leave now. My social battery is officially drained, right? Versus if I was more intentional with where to find my people, I would be going to a salsa event. I would be going to an
Me
art
too.
and paint. Yeah, right. An art and paint night. I would be going to like a hike or something where I know that those are the things that light me up, and the people that go there are also going to be people that have the same thing that lights them up, and we already have that connection point. So instead of talking about where to get non-moldy apartments in Vietnam, we could talk about something that actually connects us and that we're excited about, and maybe we can plan to go on a hike or take a class or go to an event together in the future and start to build the foundation of a friendship rather than like, okay, great. Like after 5 minutes, what did I get out of this conversation? It was not a friendship. It was a drained social battery. So I think that's definitely like one of the key pieces is like, how do you make friends in a new city? How do you find your specific people? And how do you not burn out of the process by knowing who you are a bit more?
For me, that is a good strategy too. It works very well. It works every time. Every time I go to a new city, I'm very extroverted, so I need to connect with people. Otherwise, I feel lonely and miserable. Right? That's just
Mm-hmm.
my reality. And connecting with people actually helps me ground and see, life in color. Right? It just makes it more fun and enjoyable, and it gives you things to do. One of the things I also realized is exactly like what you've said. Like there's meetups, but there's like other activities, and you look at them and you think like, oh, great, but is that all that city has to offer? Versus when you actually meet your tribe and you meet, the like-minded people that you share little things with, there's just feels like there's so much more to the city,
Yeah.
right? So especially for me, exactly like you, salsa, hiking, volleyball, this all of this works wonders for me. It makes me want to stay in the city. It makes me want to connect with the city. And then little things like, oh, maybe my apartment is moldy or things like that doesn't really, doesn't bother you so much.
And it's not a
At
main
least,
topic of conversation either. Like, how am I going to connect with you over this?
exactly. Yeah, I went to another meetup here in Barcelona as well, and I found the same difference to when we were in Chiang Mai and you connected with like-minded individuals, where versus you go to a generic meetup, everyone's nice, everyone's friendly, but it's a pool of interests and talents, and it just doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, and there's a place, right? Like there needs to be some mental preparation before going to that type of event. That type of event, I like for me to mentally prepare for that, I have to be in the mood for just like anything goes. And I'm okay with some small talk right now. And I just want to find the most interesting conversation and go there, right? Like, and not with the intention of I'm going to meet lifelong friends. Like, you're just doing it for the plot. Like, if you're just doing that for the plot, totally good, totally fine. A totally great way to go, and you ride the wave of wherever that night goes. But if you're going and you're needing some more deeper connection out of a conversation, yeah, that's not the place to start.
That's not the place to. Well, I mean, in this particular meetup, I met someone who was an organizer of volleyball, so we
Oh,
got to
okay.
connect. But beyond volleyball, we have nothing else to talk about. you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
So
funny. We actually, I went with a few girls that I have already connected with in the city, and we made a bingo card of like we didn't even stay long enough to play bingo to its completion. But it was a bingo card of all of like the common things you'll probably hear people talk about. A moldy apartment was actually on that list. I was like, bingo, I'm done. But the other parts are like, where are you from? Where are you going next? Like normal digital nomad topics of conversation, which yeah, it just depends on what you're looking for that night, but sometimes they can be a bit too much.
sometimes when you go to these things, you feel like, okay, I'm done for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. But
At
probably why I
least.
slept in all day.
Oh God, I would love to sleep more. But anyways, just I guess final closing remarks. I'd love to hear more about your mental health stories and the support for travelers. Do you have any sort of success stories that you'd like to share? Something that you witnessed with the clients that sort of improved their lifestyle and the direction of life they
Yeah.
want to go to?
Yeah, so I find that for me, my position in all of this really is the connector and curator. So I like to connect travelers to the therapists, the coaches, the professionals that can help them really with some of these more intricate challenges that they're going through. So that's why I created the Digital Nomad Therapist Directory. I'm not a therapist myself, but I have that perspective and also the experience in healthcare consulting to be able to validate the right therapists and connect them with the travelers and understand, which ones can actually provide support. And I also curate, so I create these spaces of like mental health support meetups. And our next one's actually in 10 days. I need to advertise for that. But we're focusing on dating while on the move. So I have therapists coming in and we're going to do a bit of a meetup, support group, workshop to talk about dating while traveling, especially since it's February and we are, 7 days away from
Close to
Valentine's?
Valentine's Day, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So in my process for being this in between person, I get a lot of people coming in to my groups or listening to my podcast and resonating with some of the stories that they hear. And they'll say like, yes, I am at that low point. Yes, I am traveling to escape. Yes, I am burnt out, or I do need to make new friends or, whatever incoming challenges that they come in with. And it's such a joy to be able to connect them with all the things that they need. And a lot of them are still within the groups. And like I see them multiple times in different parts of like different cities because all the Nomad hubs you end up crossing with people over and over again. Even there's one who I met online and then he said he was burnt out traveling Thailand. And I said, hey, come to Chiang Mai. So then he did. And then we co-worked a bit. He joined my groups. And then he's actually now in Da Nang with me as well. He's just like, oh, this is great. Because I in each of the cities, I also pull all of the ways that you can make friends through community. So all of those WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, different connection apps and events. I have all of that for every city. So yeah,
you gave them to me for Da Nang, and it was like a full list, and I was like, great,
yeah,
like
yeah.
this
It's
is
like
so
you can,
helpful.
yeah, and like I you can dive right in, right? So that's another thing that I curate, and I'm launching into a full like AI directory, so that as soon as you land somewhere, um, if you don't have me directly messaging it to you, you can have the AI tell you and ask you the questions of like, where are your people? Understanding your particular style of making friends, and then it just gives you. I gave you all of them that I had, but like if it just gave you the top three, that's so much better because then you already don't have to go to so many things just to do small talk, right? So it's been really great being in the middle of this because I can see the impact. Like people send me these messages of like, yes, like I'm not lonely, I made friends, and thank you. Like I met such a great community that I'm going to be traveling with them again in the future. I'm going to continue this lifestyle, right? So those are the messages that I love getting from people who have like listened to the podcast or have been connected with me through one of the things that I've made.
Well, certainly I can tell you that I'm so happy that you gave me all those links and all those WhatsApp groups because it's helped me. And like I've just mentioned, it's my strategy to feel settled in a city. So actually, it's not just the work that I need to put in once I get there, but I know like there's, communities there that I can instantly connect with and I don't have to feel, lonely or unsettled or lost or whatever. And it's all thanks to you. And I do really appreciate that. And I do really appreciate everything that you've done. I do appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking a lot about what you do. And I mean, we can talk until, the end of time.
Yes.
But we are at time, and I just want to say that I so look forward to being on your podcast as well.
Yes,
Next
we can
week.
continue the conversation.
We can continue the conversation. I think I'm going to release this episode just right around the same time so people can
Perfect.
then link and then they can follow the conversation to your podcast as well.
Amazing. Then we can talk, we can flip the script and I can ask you about your journey. I'm excited.
Yes, you can. Actually, it's going to be the first podcast that I'm going to be on opening up about my mental health
Ooh.
challenges and stuff. So it's going to be juicy.
Ooh, okay. Everyone hearing that, hop into that episode.
Yes, if you want to get to know me a little bit better, and I see the Seth on the Instagram constantly traveling and smiling, but there is a backstory. Yeah. More on that on Geleen's podcast, Travel Not to Escape.
Yes. Okay. I'm excited. And yeah, plenty more conversations because you're also heading this side of the world, right?
Exactly. End of the month, I will see you in the night.
Amazing. Okay. In-person adventures. Let's go.